Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Carl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast Radio.
Well, George Lowden has been handcrafting guitars for more than 4 decades, but his recent partnership with Ed Sheeran is set to catapult the business to international stardom. George joins me now to discuss how this partnership came about. But George, when did you first realise that you possessed such a unique skill when it came to handcrafting guitars?
I suppose really that I've been learning, every guitar I make, I learn something from it. But I suppose when I started to realize the guitars were good, I suppose was about 1977, when a shop in Switzerland got in touch and wanted to buy the guitars, and then another shop in Paris got in touch as well. And so that was when I started to realize, well, maybe I could make some sort of a living out of this.
Early on in your career, you started doing some work with the likes of Eric Clapton, and of course he was a referral from Paul Brady. So tell me a little bit about that era in your career.
Well, when I started, of course, there were political troubles going on up in the north, and therefore there were very few famous people coming here, very few famous musicians, and therefore, it was difficult for a long number of years. But from about the mid 80s onwards, some musicians started to come again, and I started to work with people like Paul Brady and Richard Thompson, and they were very encouraging. And of course, all of these musicians not only talked to me about what they would like to hear in a guitar, but also they talk to each other, and therefore sometimes I get referrals, and in the case of Paul, Eric Clapton saw his guitar, really liked it, and Paul came to us, and we made a guitar for Eric, and then he used that on to record his 2 acoustic albums.
And I know that Ed Sheeran approached you then personally with a project in mind a number of years ago. Provide us with an insight into that.
Well, the whole contact with Ed came around through Gary Lightbody and Foy Vance. So Gary contacted me and asked me to make a guitar for Ed as a present from him. And I went up to the north coast of Ireland and designed a new guitar because I knew Ed used tiny guitars, so I had to design a completely new guitar, which I did, and sent it off to Gary, and then he sent it to Ed, and then Ed and I got in touch, and we've been in touch ever since. It's been very good.
So when Ed contacted you first day, what was his overall vision for this particular project?
So Ed's vision for this project was because he wanted to have guitars which were very like the guitars that he was using, which at that time were mine, but he wanted them affordable because Lowden guitars are typically around anything from 3,000 way up to 12 or 14,000, but mostly around 3,000 to 5,000. But he realized that for young people that was out of their reach. So his motivation was to get a guitar made that was like his, with the same kind of sound and feeling, but more within reach for young people.
And of course, guitars about that €700 or £700 range. All of those guitars were probably made out of the Far East, were they?
Well, exactly so, and that's, of course it would have been easy for me to do that, to go to the Far East and say, look, Ed Sheeran would like a guitar made, designed by me, but I really wanted to do it here in Ireland, and there was also the whole issue of providing jobs, meaningful jobs for young people as well. So we have about 35 people at the moment working on this project, and so there's the job making side of it, if you like, as well as the guitars themselves. But also, seeing the guitars are made here, it's much easier to control quality, which is my obsession, if you like.
And talk to us about working with Ed on this particular project. What was his approach and how involved was he?
So he's been very involved, particularly at the very beginning. As I said, he approached me about it. I made some prototypes, and he came over and had a look at them, and then he had a look at the factory as we began to put it together. And then just just yesterday I was doing a Zoom call with him, as you have to nowadays with COVID. I did a Zoom call with him because I had sent him a couple of new models over to check out, and give me his feedback on those.
And George, any of our listeners that would have attended a Ed Sheeran concert over the years would have known that Ed, up to a few years ago at least, would have been using a Martin guitar on stage.
That's right.
So why did he decide then to move over to Lowden? What did he like about the sound that came from your own guitars?
Well, he had been using Martin for quite a few years, particularly on his early tours and his early album and so on. But he started to use my guitars for recording at the beginning, and he just liked the responsiveness of them. And of course, he was also very interested in some other musicians who used our guitars. Foy Vance, for example, was one of them, and so therefore he had the interest to pick up my guitars and try them, and he loved them, and he started to use them for recording, but found that for stage they were just too responsive.
Now, what do you mean by too responsive? Because I did hear a story now, George, that what was actually said to you at the time was Ed was more than happy to use your guitar recording, but when it came to stage, the guitar itself was just too good.
Yes, it was his manager, Stuart, who said that to me, and I was kind of, what do you mean, Stuart? And I began to think about it, and really, the crux of it was this: that when you're playing to audiences of 50,000 or 80,000, the sound system that has to be there is it's very loud, of course, and the guitars were simply responding too much, which of course is what a really good acoustic will do. But for stage use, where you've got such a big sound system, you have to actually discipline the guitar more and make it slightly less responsive, which is the opposite to what I've always been doing. So I had to go away and design a stage model for him.
George, on the basis of the success that you've had with the Sheeran by Lowden range, would you like to replicate the success by collaborating with other famous musicians in the future?
Well, I haven't really thought about it, because this project with Ed has been the biggest project, the biggest undertaking really of my working life. It was a really huge, massive undertaking to develop new technology as well as a new production facility. So we had to do things in new ways that are not done in other guitar factories, in order to make it a success here. In the future, if I wasn't the age I am, I might be interested.
You said about developing a new production system. How does this new system differ from your traditional production practices, and what benefits did it deliver for Lowden guitars?
Okay, so the main thing is that we've developed ways of gluing the parts together, using vacuum for a lot of things that other guitar companies don't do. The way that you put the parts together in a guitar, without going into too much of the detail, the way that you put them together is really important. You can use, weights, or you can use clamps. In our case, we use vacuum a lot, simply because it's a very gentle way of working. And in order for that to be a success, we've had to use aerospace technology quite a bit. So we have a lot of computer-aided design and computer-aided manufacturing going on throughout the whole process, from start to finish. And a lot of that, even 3D printing, we use quite a bit for the molds and so on. So it's been an amazing journey for the last 2 years, and we're still not finished in the development work yet, although most of it is done now.
And of course, integrating a new system into a business can be challenging at the best of times. But how important was it to collaborate with the industry to navigate any teething problems that arose?
Well, because this was new technology that we were developing, it was really vital to communicate both with our own aerospace engineers that we were employing for this project, and also for them to be able to talk to their colleagues, that they worked with before, because a lot of the technology which is used in building airplanes and designing airplanes today, a lot of that technology is usable in other disciplines, and so it has been very important and also very helpful as we've gone along. Although I would have to say that the teething problems that we have come up against are not. They're fairly specific to guitar making in the main.
And this innovation did not go unnoticed, as Lowden Guitars recently won the New Frontiers category in the Irish Times Innovation Awards. But what did this award mean to you, George?
It was really good to be recognised. For the last 2 years I'd been up to my neck and beyond in developing this project, and for us to be recognised now for how far we've been able to take it so far has been very helpful and very motivating. Sometimes you're working at night time and working very hard trying to overcome a problem, and it's just good to be recognised in a wider way, especially by the Irish Times and so on. It's been great.
And it's great as well, of course, that your own son is going to be taking over the business shortly. But in the meantime, what is your overall goal for your collaboration with Ed Sheeran on that range?
Well, yes, it is good that my son Aaron will be taking over from me in due course. He's already the production director here in the company. And my son-in-law, Dave Osdal, is the managing director. So it's a family business for the future. And I know that Ed has already, met Dave and Aaron, and, so that relationship that I have with Ed will be ongoing, but probably in the next number of years more with regard to Dave and Aaron. For myself, I'm just developing new models with Ed, and also with my son. He's involved in that as well. And I think that this project has got a long way to run yet. We're at a very early stage in terms of the shops where it is, where you can get them. We still have a long way to go there.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was George Lowden from Lowden Guitars, and I've no doubt that the Sheeran by Lowden Guitars will be number one with the next generation of musicians.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Carl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast Radio.